I think the One Law for All campaign has tried to actually get together as large a spectrum of people as possible. Douglas Murray, for example, is a supporter of One Law for All, as are Muslims and humanists and secularists and so on and so forth. We've got 27,000 people who've supported our petition and who've supported the campaign. So it isn't a question of excluding people just for the sake of excluding them. There are a lot of people in the One Law for All campaign who I would consider right-wing and must probably not want to be friends with, but if we agree on a specific mandate, which is to end Sharia law and to defend secularism and to get rid of all religious laws, then I think it's important to work together. But I also think that it's important to draw the lines. You know, we agree generally that the BNP is a fascist organization. Since February, it's been forced legally to include non-white members. But this doesn't necessarily make the BNP suddenly a non-racist organization or an anti-racist organization. And I think what's important is that when you look at political, I'm not talking about individuals, but political movements, political organizations, and states, for example, you do need to look beyond what they say to what they actually mean and what they're actually doing to make a judgment on their actions and on what they intend. For example, just because George Bush says the war on Iraq is for the promotion of human rights doesn't necessarily make it so. You know, so I think if you look at the EDL and Stop Islamization of Europe, they make a point of saying that they're not racist. And I think they're actually using, in a way, it gives credit to the anti-racist movement because they know how important it is to say that they're not racist, in the same way that Islamists will say criticizing Islam is racism, because they know that's a way they can evade scrutiny and they can silence people. And I think the far right are using that argument as well. They immediately come quickly and say, we're not racist. And for example, if you look at the EDL, and before I say that, let me say I've said for 20, 30 years now that criticizing Islam is not racism, Islamism are not races. But you can still have organizations that are criticizing Islam that are racist. Now, just to give you an example, the EDL, for example, you have one of its spokespersons, Tommy Robinson, who has been a member of the BNP. His pseudonym is actually the name of a well-known football hooligan. You have supporters chanting, Muslim bombers off our streets, we hate Muslims. You have neo-Nazis bearing swastika tattoos. And they've actually then turned out to be EDL organizers and official stewards. And some of the things that they've said, for example, that is attacking Muslims and not Islamism, and that's the difference. For example, he said, I'm willing to go to the north of England and do what needs to be done for the mothers and children who've been caught up in this Muslim savagery. And in an interview, when the interviewer asked him, are you saying that every devout Muslim is under instruction to convert people and they're extremists? He said, yes, definitely yes. And you've got others like Mad Nick Gregor, who's been photographed wearing Nazi uniform and amid SS memorabilia. The Sikh, they've got they talk very much about having minorities in their group, like Gurmeet Singh, who's a spokesperson. He's said, for example, if the barriers break one day and our lads get through, we'll murder them all. And on his Facebook, he talks about there's no sort of thing as moderate Muslims, and someone who made fun of Muslim beards, he said, well, don't compare it to rats because rats deserve better than that. And at a rally, he's, for example, said, God bless every single person in the country, all religions, creeds, cultures, even God bless the Muslims. They'll need it for when they're fucking burning in hell. And so on and so forth. So, the fact that the organization says they're inclusive is not enough. That's the point that we're trying to make, that you need to look at what they're actually trying to do, and they're trying to promote a racist and anti-immigrant agenda. It's like saying that because there are women in the Islamic Republic of Iran's assembly, that is not sexist. Ridiculous, absurd. If you look at Stop Islamization of Europe, you don't need to look at their website. Just look at some of the comments that Stephen Gash, its founder, has made on our website alone. He says, before I go into that, their slogan, racism is the lowest form of human stupidity. Is that all racism is? Racism kills, it dehumanizes. It's one of the most vile things, and all they can come up with as their slogan is that it's a form of stupidity. And, one of the things he said, this is a quote, Conflating anti-Islam with racism is ridiculous. We're openly hardline against Muslims, but that means Muslims of all races. Muslims are comprised of many races and kill non-Muslims of all races, and therefore race is not an issue. So basically, because there are white Muslims as well, their attack of Muslims is not racism. I'm sorry. You know, the co-founder, this is the other thing that racist organizations often do. Oh, the co-founder has mixed-race children. You know, where's the connection? Where's the logic to this? It's absurd. It's outrageous. It's an affront to our intelligence to say that these groups are also anti-Islamists. We need to work together. No. And that's what we're trying to say. No. We have to push them back. They are exactly the same as the Islamic movement. They are a far-right movement. The reason they have risen is because of the rise of the far-right across the world. That's why they've risen. And the appeasement of Western governments and so on and so forth. Just a few more examples. All of them, the EDL and the Stop Islamization in Europe, they've all gone to Paris and had a conference in December. And one of the French organizers has written to us saying, we're also fighting against the invading Muslims. And I wrote back saying, we're not fighting against Muslims, we're fighting against Islamism. And the minute you tell them that, you get this is the general answer. Well, you know, you can't fight Islamism without fighting Muslims, full stop. And you know what the founder of Stop Islamization of Europe has said? Islam requires Muslims, Nazism requires Nazis, communism requires communism, they're all filthy, we despise them. And so it's basically one thing they keep saying over and over again, there's no moderate Muslim. They all use taqiyya or whatever they use, and they'll say, even I'm an ex-Muslim, I'm an atheist, but I'm using taqiyya when I criticize them. Give me a break. You know, this is nonsense. And what I'm saying is, yes, we want to create the biggest movement we possibly can, but that does not mean, you know, you want to make Britain better? Well, why don't you join the BNP and join the Labour and Conservative? Everybody join together. You can't do that. This is politics. It's not a game. It's important. These are groups that are dehumanizing large groups of our population here and across the world. I just want to say a few more things to end, sorry. Just to say that Islamization of Europe, watch out, this is the words that they always use. They attack immigrants and demography. They're always talking about that. They have no problem with religion's role, but with Islam. They want to ban the Quran. And they use violence. If you look at actually they're very similar to the Islamic movement. Violence, they use religion, they want to appear as victim status. Christmas is no longer possible for Christians to practice in Britain. They're such a persecuted group. I mean, just ridiculous. And finally, I want to say, the thing that Islamists and the far right have is they promote collective blame. The Islamists will bomb every discotheque, every bus, every city, every citizen they can get their hands on, because they believe that everybody living in America or every woman who doesn't want to wear the veil in Iran is westernized and deserves to die. And in the same way the far right says, every Muslim, and for goodness sakes, not everybody who comes from Iran or Afghanistan or Pakistan is Muslim to begin with. And there are different types of Muslims anyway. Social groups, they don't see the protests and the working class movements within those countries and communities, and they do exactly the same thing. And so what we're saying is, it's not about us being exclusive, it's about being inclusive, but keep the racists and fascists out, otherwise we're not going to win. And yes, we, all of us, are part of that movement to stop Islamism. That's how things change. People, progressive social movements, and we are going to be successful, and we are going to happen. In fact, every single one of us in this room, except possibly Douglas.
I trust that most people here, one of the reasons why we're here is because we all agree that there is a problem of radical Islam, not just in Britain, but in the world today, that a militant Islamist movement does exist. It's extremely powerful. Several countries are in its grip. It's growing, and it's growing in presence not only in individual countries, but in the UN and in communities in this country. It is real, it has a real presence, and it shouldn't be ignored. Now, that said, I now want to get on to insulting you. This problem, I would submit, ladies and gentlemen, will not be solved by everyone in this hall here tonight. Even by everyone on this panel. Noble sentiments, as I'm sure we'll all express. This hall and you will not solve this problem. You will not solve it on your own. it will require a whole range of people making their own individual points and their own individual positions to do that. And as maybe the only small C Conservative on this panel, maybe even in the hall, I'd like to make the following point, which is how much some of us object to the idea that there are parameters for debate and parameters of what is respectable within debate that will be decided solely on the left. There are all sorts of criteria that can be applied to your own personal judgment of what you think is right and wrong. But this debate will have to be had a lot more frankly if we're going to win it. The first thing I'd say is this. Just as in the Cold War, in the battle against communism, a vital component is a toolbox approach to defeating the enemy of Islamist extremism. Now, some of that will be people who you and I don't like. There are standards and norms which we can certainly express, but we should be exceedingly careful, I would submit, about where we draw those lines. Because before you know it, you'll be chucking out people who may well have perfectly legitimate points to make and who may well have, believe it or not, a larger following than any of us here tonight could ever have. Are there places you draw the lines? Of course. I think everyone in this hall would be in agreement. The British National Party is an overtly racist organisation. It always has been. There's not going to be a moment when it isn't. Nobody's going to join who doesn't believe in those fundamentally racist principles of the party. Are there people like that who will jump on this bandwagon? Sure. But we're going to have to be extremely careful in who else we lump in with them. We spend all of our time, and quite rightly, shouldn't stop doing it, differentiating out between different types of Islam, different types of Muslims, and so on and so forth. But the minute it's a group of white, middle-aged men, it's with huge delight that people decide, excellent, we will dismiss them as one single block, no need to investigate further. Let me give you an example. The English Defence League, an extraordinary phenomenon which, by the way, in my opinion, wouldn't have occurred if the government had have got a grip on al-Mujahirun. It only came about because the authorities didn't do anything about that particularly thuggish organisation. These things have consequences. The English Defence League, when they started protesting, had banners saying things like, you know, Sharia law discriminates against women. Sharia law is anti-gay. Well, I'm good with both of those sentiments. I'm sure most people in this room are. If you were ever going to have a grassroots response from non-Muslims to Islamism, that would be how you'd want it, surely. But, of course, we all know there are awkward things around this. There have been exposed links from the EDL with far-right organisations in individual cases, and maybe others will know more about this wider than that. But, you know, for instance, Louis Amis wrote a very interesting piece in Standpoint magazine some months ago after investigation, and he said, and others have said, that as far as they can see within the EDL, they have tried to kick out BNP elements. Does that mean that they aren't racist, or they aren't? I'm not making a definitive call. I'm just saying these things are extremely complex, and we ought to be careful before dismissing whole swathes of people. Thirdly, these groups stop the Islamization of Europe and stop the Islamization of America. I mean, I don't know enough about them, maybe. As far as I can see, Stop the Islamization of Europe only has a few members. And in America, Robert Spencer is one of the directors. I happen to know Robert Spencer. I respect him. He's a very brilliant scholar and writer. Now, some people in this hall may disagree with him, may disagree with all sorts of things he says. Well, sure, but Maryam Namazie sitting beside me is a communist. I disagree with Maryam Namazie on a whole range of things. She disagrees with me because I'm a conservative. But I don't think that Maryam Namazie should be out of the debate. I don't think anyone who was once a member of the Communist... I mean, I'm sitting on a panel with somebody who's a member of the Communist Party. Does that mean in future I should never be given a platform? The 20th century had two dreadful totalitarianisms, fascism and communism. Some of the people who people in this hall would throw out from being ever allowed to speak are being thrown out because once they met somebody who once sat on a platform with somebody who was once a member of a fascist party. Well, I'm sitting on a platform with a communist. That would mean I could never again speak in public if there was any sense to this debate. But there isn't, because people have this debate so ruddy badly. All spend their time polishing their halos. Yes, we're against racism. Yes, we're against fascism. We're against lots of things. But it's going to require a bit more than that, and a bit more of this halo polishing, if you're going to deal with that. And as I say, leave you with one final thought on that. If this battle is going to be won, it will not be won solely by the people sitting in Conway Hall here tonight. It will be won by a lot of people.